Good afternoon, everybody. Tom with the Museum of the Great Wars, yet again reporting to you today from Kingman Army Airfield, also known as the Kingman Municipal Airport, also known as KIMG. Today we're in front of our World War II AT-7 trainer. And this is a really neat airplane, and it's got a really neat story of how it came to be, and we're going to share a little bit of that with you guys. Talk a little bit about how we ended up acquiring the aircraft, and about the work that was done on it prior to us getting it, and the work that we've done to it since we've picked it up. The Beech 18, or AT-7, as this particular example was originally, came about in the late 1930s, and these were designed to be used as regional airliners. Now, right now, you're looking at this thing and probably thinking, wow, that's a really, really small regional airliner. And everything is relative. These were designed to carry anywhere from between 6 to 8 passengers. And your mainstream aircraft at the time for a normal airline was a DC-3, which would carry 19 to 21 passengers. If you look at, say, a regional jet today, they carry 50 passengers. A 737 carries 150. So you can kind of see the ratio is about the same. The other thing about air travel in the 1930s is it was very, very, very expensive. And so typically you didn't go buy a ticket on an airplane unless you had all sorts of money. And as you can tell, we apologize for the background noise, but we're got an aircraft coming in to refuel right now. So anyhow, that's what happens when you film on the airport. So anyhow, in the late 1930s rather, the United States military, realizing that war was coming and starting to realizing they needed more aircraft, looked at the Beech 18 and they were wondering, what can we possibly use this airplane for? This aircraft would ultimately be produced around 8,500 units. They would use this aircraft as a navigator trainer, a bombardier trainer. They would use it as a hack, which was an airplane that would just be used as a general purpose aircraft. They were used as VIPs. They were used to do medical evacuations. They were used for any number of different roles that you could envision using a twin-engine airplane that's capable of carrying 6 to 8 passengers. Now, you've heard us say the term AT-7, and the AT-7 was the navigator version of this trainer, and that is what this airplane originally started its life as in 1943. Now, as time went on, ultimately 75 to 80% of all of the navigators that were trained how to learn their task during World War II were trained in one of these aircraft. Another version of this airplane was called an AT-11. The AT-11 actually had a glass nose, had a top turret, a small bomb bay, and was actually used to train bombardiers. Again, roughly 75% of the men who would learn to be bombardiers learned how on a Beechcraft product. Now, this airplane was built, like I say, in 43. In 1946, it was declared surplus by the Army Air Force and actually transferred to the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy originally operated this airplane in the same configuration, only they called it an SNB-2. In 1950 to 52, the Navy sent a gaggle of these aircraft back to Beechcraft in Wichita to be rebuilt into just standard, what they called at the time an SNB-5, which is just a general runabout multi-purpose aircraft. This airplane left Beechcraft in 1953, was handed back over to the U.S. Navy, and ultimately served for another 17 years. This airplane served in places such as Pensacola, where it was retired from. It served in Okinawa. It served in Japan. It served in multiple different fleet units and multiple different roles. The last job that it had with U.S. military service was in Pensacola with a squadron called VT-10. And if we look over here on the tail, we can actually still see the remnants of the VT-10 marking, as well as the Navy markings here. And then further back, we can see the aircraft's bureau number 67212, and the fact that in the 60s they redesignated these aircraft yet again and called them UC-45Js, which is kind of interesting because the Air Force, or rather the Navy, finally went back to the Army Air Force's original designation, which was a C-45. The 1970, 71, 72 is when these aircraft were all retired. And this airplane went to David Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, which is where the majority of retired aircraft go. And what's really neat, and one of the things I'm going to show you now, is we actually have a photo. And I'm going to walk up here to the camera. Hopefully he can zoom in good on it for us. And this is this actual airplane, not a copy of it, not a rendering of it, this actual airplane in 1971 at David Monthan Air Force Base. So what happened to the airplane after that? Well, the airplane was transferred to the Department of Agriculture. It was then sold to another entity who most likely stripped the engines off of her. The airplane then made its way to Falcon Field, to the Confederate Air Force, as it was known at that time. The Confederate Air Force could have done one of two things with it. They could have either re-engined it and continued to use the airplane for preservation and history and all the things that they say they're about, or they could have done what they chose to do, which was scrap it. Now, enter the equation, late 90s, a gentleman named Bob Kropp, or Robert Kropp, owner of AN Vintage. Now, Robert is a bit like myself. He's a bit of an airplane nerd, and he is huge into how do we save things. And as the story was told to me by him, one day several gentlemen from the Confederate Air Force came over and asked him if he had a cutting torch or a sawzall. And Robert looked at him and said, "Why do you need a sawzall or a cutting torch?" And they said, "Well, we're going to finish dismantling this airplane, and we're going to go ahead and take it to the scrapyard for beer money." Robert ended up purchasing the airplane from him for the scrap value, and then spent the next 25 years of his life doing everything he could do to save this aircraft. Now, when he bought this airplane, you have to understand, there was no wings, there was no flight controls, there were no engines. Most of the glass was missing, the door was missing, the tail was missing. All sorts of things were missing off of this airplane. And he spent, I say, basically the next 30 years working on piecing stuff together. 2 years ago, Robert, unknown to me at that time, posted an ad for a magneto. Now, a magneto is what powers the ignition on a radial engine or an aircraft engine. And this particular magneto, we'll talk about at some other future episode, was actually found here in Kingman in the early 90s, tucked under the edge of a hangar, where it had been removed during the scrapping process at Depot 41 in 1947 or 1948. Now, allow me to interject a little bit of humor. I don't care if you're a boat person, I don't care if you're a car person, I don't care if you're an airplane person. There are certain things that lead to other things. This magneto led to this airplane. In the world, we would call it a gateway drug. Maybe it's called a gateway part. I don't know. But anyhow, that's exactly what happened. We had to go down to take my wife to Phoenix for some treatment for her condition. And I had to leave her for about 6 hours. I went to pick up the magneto, had a conversation with Bob, and ended up buying an airplane. It certainly wasn't what we intended, and it started a 1-year journey of disassembling the airplane and bringing her up here. Now, as we see her in her current condition, we're getting ready to paint it. Right now, we've had to do a lot of sheet metal work, and we've got sheet metal work that's being done by the wonderful folks over here at the Jet Yard. And I can't say enough about Dylan, and I can't say enough about Jay. These two gentlemen have volunteered their time to come in and reskin all of the flight controls. The flight controls on these aircraft were originally fabric. And of course, that fabric deteriorates down over the years sitting in the desert. And we were fortunate enough that when we got this airplane, we got it with a complete pile of spare flight controls. And so we've been taking them over one at a time to the guys at the Jet Yard, and they've been reskinning them with aluminum. Now, we're not necessarily trying to do an airworthy job because we're not going to ever fly this airplane again, but we want something that'll hold up to the Arizona sun that we can show the airplane off. They've reskinned the flaps, they've reskinned the tail, and on the other side of the, up here on the front, they're reskinning the left-hand nacelle right now, which was damaged years and years ago, most likely due to a landing gear door alignment issue. Now, the question becomes, what do we ultimately do with the inside of the airplane? The inside of the airplane is completely open right now, and what our plan is to go ahead and actually not necessarily do a period correct restoration. We do have the all the instruments for the flight deck. We've got the instrument panel, so we're going to be putting all of that in. We've got seats, and we want a place where kids can sit and enjoy it and look like they're in an airplane. In the back of the airplane, we're actually going to use this as part of the museum. And the intent is to go ahead and build a small cabinet down the right-hand side of the fuselage because we have things that we want to display. We have things that people used when they learned how to be a navigator in one of these aircraft. This, for example, is one of the things that we have, which is super cool. And it is actually a smoke bomb. And these airplanes were actually equipped with a chute where they would drop these out. And then the navigators would look at the smoke, and by judging how fast the smoke was moving over the ground, they could figure out how fast the wind was moving, and they could figure out how to correct using for navigational things. We've got stuff like that. One of the other neat things that we have is we actually have the stopwatch and the watches that they use to navigate the aircraft with. And this one needs to be wound up, but anyhow, this is one of the 24-hour navigator clocks that would be mounted in the aircraft. When they had navigators in them, they would have had one in each window, basically on the right-hand side of the fuselage. So anyhow, like we were saying, we're going to be working on the interior of the airplane, completing it. The exterior is going to be painted in a 1960s Navy paint job. And you can kind of see the remnants as you look at it right now, and I'm going to show you guys something really cool. And this is a wonderful book. It's available on eBay if anybody wants to nerd out all about Beech 18s and naval service. But this gives you a pretty good idea of what the paint job will look like once we go ahead and get it all painted. Now I'm going to flip the book around, and I'm going to show you guys something else very neat. And if we look at this photo right here, where you see NFO Trainer, that is, yet again, this exact airplane in service with its country in 1970 at Andrews Air Force Base. So that'll be the paint job that ends up being on this airplane. Like I say, the 1960s Navy paint job. And a lot of people ask the question, is it worth putting the effort into saving this sort of an airplane? When you go to an air show or you go to a big museum, what you'll notice is all the fighters and bombers get all the glory. We're not about the story of the airplane. I want you to know the background of this particular aircraft because so much love has gone into saving it. But what is important is we're telling the story of all of the pilots, all of the navigators, all of the bombardiers who ultimately train in these kinds of aircraft and whose stories we're going to be telling you. We're going to be telling you in August the story of the city of Phoenix, the last B-29 shot down over Japan. Guess what? The pilot, or not the pilot so much, but the navigator and the bombardier, they learned their trades in exactly this kind of aircraft. And that's what this is so important, is that we tell the stories of those men and we use this as a backdrop to those stories. So that's why this is such an important thing for us. You know, like I say, it's part of what we do. The other thing that's going to be very interesting is hopefully the next time we film, we're going to be actually filming in front of our building, which is being delivered Tuesday morning. Now, it won't be ready or set or done till this fall, but I want you guys to be able to come by and see what the future vision is. And when you see that airplane there, what's going to be really, well, we see the building there. I let off a little bit too much there. What's going to be really neat is then you're going to know that this airplane is ultimately going to be there as well. Now, if you come out to the airport and you just see, you expect to see airplanes. They're everywhere. Heck, there's a nice Beech 836 taxiing by us right now. But when you go out to, say, the middle of New Kingman Butler, and all of a sudden you see an airplane in the middle of a lot, people pay attention. And I think it's going to be a very neat thing for the community. I know today's been a little bit of a different program. In the past, we always talked about just somebody's individual story. And today we're talking a little bit about our story and about the story of this aircraft. But I appreciate you tuning in, and it's all going to build and go together. In another 6 months or so, we're going to have another update for you on the airplane. Hopefully by then we'll have a little bit of paint on her. The #1 engine is on its way from Mesa, Arizona. We should have it hopefully next month. We've got a brand new set of props going to go on it. There's all sorts of amazing things that are happening with this aircraft. And with this aircraft, as well as with the Museum of the Great Wars. I appreciate Mother Road Media covering us and being out here today and helping us out. As always, we appreciate you, the viewers. We appreciate you, the donors. We appreciate everybody who has helped us along the way. Rob and Mesa, you're the man. Thank you.